Well, this is it. Another Little Roosters season is coming to an end. My name is SH Matt, and I want to solve the final murders. I know I started doing these videos near the end of the season, but I hope you guys have been enjoying watching them as much as I've enjoyed making them. This will be the final DLR video, for now at least, and I want to make it special. 3 guests remain in the mansion, and today I'd like to present to you my thoughts, theories, and predictions for the final episode of the show, showing who I believe to be this week's victim, how they will die, and who the murderer is. As usual, this will include an analysis of this week's stanza, looking at the episodes of the show for clues, and making connections that could potentially fit the puzzle. We'll be doing a deeper dive into the show today since we're also looking at the killer this week, so get strapped in for a wild ride. Spoilers inbound for DLR up to episode 7. Do yourself a favor and watch this awesome show so you're ready for the finale. Well, little Eric took a monkey paw to the face, so I'm happy that once again I had a successful prediction this week. A successful killer and murder prediction this week would have me sitting at 12 out of 16, which is an admirable score to be sure, but needs to be improved so I can be one of the cool kids. For the last time, we have to analyze the stanzas each week to find clues that point towards the victim and weapon, and connect them to clues from within the show itself, plus some RT lore. Today, we're looking to predict the final interactive murder based on stanza 8, which reads, Rivalry of siblings past. The 8th ended as first forecast. The first line is a singular word, rivalry. The word is pretty self-explanatory. Rivalry implies 2 people or characters being competitive with each other, even to the point of fighting each other. This could be implying that some characters may be facing off, such as the killer and this week's victim. There's still a lot of things to put together though, so let's just move on for now. The second line of the stanza reads, of siblings past. Siblings are obviously people who share a common parent. That much is pretty well known. I think the most important word to properly define in this line, however, is past. There are a lot of definitions for past, from more literal things like something moving past something else, to the less literal things like passing up an opportunity. The entire first 2 lines put together could read that a rivalry between 2 siblings has passed, meaning it is now in the past. In the context of this show, however, I believe that past refers to someone that has died. There has been a decent amount of death in this show so far, so I don't think it's unreasonable to make such a connection. If this is the case, we need to establish which siblings the stanza is referring to. The show has made a couple of direct mentions that Alfredo and Trevor look alike, leading to people confusing the 2 and thinking that they are twins. This is based on a running joke at Achievement Hunter from when Alfredo joined the group. We first saw the mention during the Boo Crew scene in episode 3, and Officer Jessica calls Alfredo Trevor in episode 7. This puts a point in the column of Alfredo being a potential victim this week. However, that is not the only sibling connection we have. There have also been a few references, both direct and indirect, to the Rooster Teeth show Ruby. It's also been established that 2 guests portray characters in Ruby. Lindsay plays Ruby Rose, and Barbara plays Yang Zhao Long. These 2 characters are sisters in the show, meaning that you could link the siblings line to Lindsay as well. So for now, it seems like we can link the first half of the stanza to either Alfredo or Lindsay as the victim this week. The third line reads, the 8th ended. Ended obviously relates to death, but it can also be defined as to reach a specified ultimate rank or place. In this case, however, I feel like it's simply a definition of death, so let's just move on to the final line. This final line reads, as first forecast. Forecast is defined as a prediction made based on prior data or information. I believe that this means the death this week will be in reference to some sort of prediction or weapon mentioned prior. At this point, I actually feel very confident in eliminating Alfredo as a victim this week. There just isn't any weapon in the remaining arsenal that links with Alfredo and the stanza in an explainable way. If so, that leaves Lindsay as our main victim choice. If Lindsay is our victim, then the first forecast line could leave us with two possible weapons. The first of these is another puma. We know that a puma was released at the same time as the platypus that killed Michael in episode 3. We also know that Hannah mentions a puma in her final words before she gets moonballed. The reason this is a possible weapon is explained by looking back at the OG 10 Little Roosters. In this debut Little Roosters season, Lindsay was killed by a puma. This potentially ties back to Lindsay since we know that a puma is in the building, and the first forecast could mean that Lindsay is killed as they were first killed. This also makes the weapon name, Another Puma, make more sense since Lindsay was the one to die to a puma before. They're the only guest left who could die to another puma. It's also interesting to point out that the puma was referenced in episode 7 when we see the Puma King DVD on Trevor's desk. On the other hand, I believe the other potential weapon this week could be the Ruby Gun Gauntlet. This is something we saw with Barbara in episode 1 before she got blown, but there are other connections to make that could help this line up pretty nicely. First, the weapon states that it is from Ruby, meaning that once again it connects Barb and Lindsay to their Ruby characters, who are siblings, fitting the first half of the stanza. This also works as a weapon choice since when Barb prepares to confront the killer, she says,
"Let's end this with a yay!"
The gun gauntlet, known as the Ember Celica in Ruby, is Yang's weapon, meaning that the first forecast line could refer to what Barb says here. Barbara was the first killed, so the line could be interpreted as the 8th ended as the first dead forecast. If this is the connection that Josh wants us to make, then it makes a lot of sense to choose the gun gauntlet as this week's weapon. So, from the stanza, it looks like Lindsay is our prime victim choice, with our main choices of weapon being either another puma or the Ruby Gun Gauntlet. The devilish fiend himself, Josh, put out another singular DLR tip for us this week, which reads, "This is probably the easiest week. That's all I'll say." Based on this, Josh seems to believe this week's murder is pretty straightforward to solve, but my dumb brain is making me question everything. It's been very tough to try and split the difference between Lindsay by Puma and Lindsay by Gun Gauntlet, since there are solid arguments for both. Evidence for the Puma includes Nicodemus's mention of the Puma in episode 1, Hannah's mention of wanting to die by Puma in episode 2, the Puma King DVD on Trevor's desk in episode 7, and Lindsay's ties to the Puma from 10 Little Roosters connecting to first forecast. Evidence for the gun gauntlet includes the gauntlet Barbara makes in episode 1, the fact that Barb says she will end this with a yang in episode 1, the ties between Lindsay and Barb via the characters they portray in Ruby lining up with the siblings' past line, and Yang's weapon in Ruby also being a gun gauntlet. Just on the DLR Discord server alone, there's been a lot of discussion back and forth, and people seem pretty split. Are we all just overthinking this way too much? I mean, probably. Obviously, both Puma and Gun Gauntlet fit for the second half of the stanza for reasons I've discussed before. The second line, of siblings past, makes an immediate connection to Lindsay and Barbara being siblings in Ruby, so we're led to think that the weapon is related to Barb somehow. This makes the train of thought lead to Gun Gauntlet pretty easily, but there is still a separate train that connects to Another Puma. We already mentioned that Another Puma is a callback to the original 10 Little Roosters. In that series, Barbara was the killer, and unlike in Dead Little Roosters, Barb wrote the poem that predicted everyone's deaths. This means that in TLR, Barb forecast that Lindsay would die by Puma. At the end of that show, Barb was killed, so that version of her has also passed. It is important to note that within the context of DLR, TLR is only a show. so there's still reason to believe both weapons from lines 2, 3, and 4 of the stanza. The first line is where I saw the differences. As I mentioned before, the word rivalry means people facing off against each other in some form. This still works for the gun gauntlet, since that is a weapon that could be wielded by a person. As mentioned by Lil Tooth in the DLR Discord, rivalry in the context of the whole stanza could mean a battle between two Barbaras, or better yet, two Yangs. We also saw Lindsay making something in episode 7 that she believes will help her escape. This could easily be another gun gauntlet, making it very possible she could end up facing off with the killer, with each person having their own gauntlet, and she falls to the killer by that gauntlet. While rivalry has connections to the gun gauntlet, I just cannot see any strong connections between rivalry and another Puma. Seeing two Pumas face off against each other seems unlikely, and I just can't think of any other way of how rivalry fits with a Puma weapon. That doesn't discount all of the points in favor of Puma, however. The Puma King DVD does have a Puma King 2 DVD below it, which is a literal reference to another Puma. Since Josh said this week is the easiest, it could mean there are no red herrings this time around, meaning these DVDs are meant to be pointing us to the Puma. This has been a whirlwind of a week when it's all said and done, and I have gone back and forth on this so many times my head is spinning. However, I have to make a decision. My prediction for stanza 8 will be that Lindsay dies by another Puma. Hopefully I explained myself well enough. If it is indeed the gauntlet, then well done to those of you that guessed it. I'm not in the running to win the grand prize after my shambles of a start in the opening weeks, but hopefully I can pull off a successful final prediction. Normally, this is where the video would end, but this is the finale, so we have one more deduction to make. Lindsay, Issa, or Alfredo? Who is the killer? I know we had to make our killer and survivor predictions week 1, but I haven't had a chance to discuss it in prior videos, so I figured this would be the best time to do so. We'll have a quick look at the final stanza, then look at each possible candidate one by one to see which one is likely the culprit. The 9th and final stanza reads, "For the 9th, the killer, justice was fated, so the 10th survived and celebrated." So, first and foremost, I am highly doubtful of Lindsay being the killer due to the seemingly very high chance of them being the victim tied to the 8th stanza. They did stab Fiona with the lollipop in episode 6, but I don't think this meant they were the actual killer masterminding the whole thing. If this is true, that leaves us with two possible killers, the two that were the most popular killer choices since episode 1, Issa and Alfredo. Issa has had a few potential hints towards being the killer throughout the show. In episode 1, Trevor mentions that he felt like the killer wanted their artistry to be documented. Issa being an animator at Rooster Teeth means she does make art, and her show, recorded by Arizal, is all about the main character Arizal wanting to be a record keeper. She didn't have many scenes early on in the show, which led viewers to believe that she would have more scenes later on. We also see that Eric is in the room clockwise to Issa, but we don't see if anyone is in the room counterclockwise to her. Since we know from episode 1 that the killer is in the room clockwise of Barbara, the possibility remained that she could be sandwiched between Eric and Barb. Unfortunately, I have to debunk Issa as the killer as well. The major nails in the coffin regarding this came starting in episode 6, when Trevor mentions Barb still being dead across the way from Issa. I interpreted this line as meaning that Issa's room was on the opposite end of the courtyard from Barbara's room, which would make it impossible for her to be right next to Barb. Also, in episode 7, Officer Jessica mentions that Hannah's room was right next to the library. If you've been taking notes on room locations throughout the show, such as who's across the courtyard from who and who is next to who, you know that Hannah is next to the library. There is no room combination that fits with Issa being next to Barb. Now, some of these nails could potentially be interpreted in other ways, but the final nail is pretty damning. In episode 7, Issa sees the killer attack and kill Eric, meaning there's no possible way for her to be the killer herself. Sorry, Issa predictors, it's not her. If everything up in this video so far checks out, that only leaves one possible solution. The source himself, Alfredo, is the killer. Like Issa, Alfredo didn't have many scenes in earlier episodes besides the Pickle and Boo Crew scenes, meaning people believed he would be more prominent in later episodes. Also like Issa, Alfredo could be connected to the artistry documented line when he interrupts all the overlapping stories to break the fourth wall and say,
Wait, stop. There's just way too many narrators, okay? That's just lazy storytelling, alright? Can we just pick one and move on?
Something else I noted in episode 1 was that just before Barbara reads the addendum, she mentions that whoever kills the guests this way will inherit all of Nicodemus's estate. Since Nicodemus is shown to be quite rich, it makes sense that the killer is motivated by money. Along with this, when everyone is pitching shows to Hannah in episode 1, Alfredo wants to bring back hardcore Monopoly, but more along the lines of season 1, where he won. Hannah's reply caught my attention hard.
Right, it kind of sounds like you're more interested in getting money than doing another show.
Alfredo is the only of our remaining 3 guests who explicitly mentions he wants to get more money, meaning he has a clear motive to carry out these killings to inherit Nicodemus's estate. You could also say that maybe when he mentions talking to the art department, he learns of the monkey suit, but that's just some extra theorizing for myself. Alfredo has also never seen the killer at any point, and if we follow the same line of logic from the room analysis earlier, he is the only remaining possible guest who can be in the killer's room next to Barbara. I may have gotten my survivor prediction wrong, sorry Iffy, but I think my killer prediction is right on the money. Alfredo is our killer. Honestly, I feel pretty bummed that DLR is already ending. Time has flown by while the show's been on, and I've had an awesome time discussing possible solutions with fellow fans in the community. Thank you to everyone who helped make discussions super fun and super interesting. I also want to thank the entire cast and crew behind the show. Even with the restrictions we have in the world right now, this team was able to put together something so awesome that blew my expectations right out of the water. Josh, Fiona, I highly commend you both. This show was awesome, and I can only hope that we get another Little Roosters show sometime soon. Finally, I want to thank you, yes, you, for watching this video. I wish I had started these videos back when the show actually started, but I still had a great time putting these together regardless. It's been great to get back into the creative zone, and I want to put even more great content out there this year and beyond. I've got a few things in the works already, but just know that you haven't seen the last of me yet. If you liked the video, give it a like. Think I can improve on anything? Leave a comment down below. And be sure to subscribe for more awesome content. Thanks again, and good luck.